All right, wrestling fans, welcome back to From the Pages, where we crack open vintage wrestling magazines and dig into the wild world of kayfabe journalism. Today, we're taking it back to August 1981 with the Ring Wrestling magazine. This issue is stacked with some of the biggest names in pro wrestling: Verne Gagne, Giant Baba, Jerry Lawler, Tommy Rich, Murdoch and Junkyard Dog, and a whole special section on women's wrestling, which surprisingly isn't just pinups and fluff. The early 80s were a weird transitional period in wrestling. We weren't in the rock and wrestling era yet, but we were moving out of the rough and tumble 70s. The territories were still alive. Vince McMahon Jr. was probably sitting in a boardroom somewhere plotting global domination, and Hulk Hogan was still just another big guy with a weird mustache in the AWA. So let's turn back the clock and go from the pages. All right, check out this classic cover. Tommy Wildfire Rich, looking like he just finished fighting a bear in a Georgia parking lot, and the fabulous Moolah reminding everyone why she was the most powerful woman in wrestling at the time. The table of contents reads like a who's who of 1981 wrestling. Up, Verne Gagne versus Giant Baba in Japan. A deep dive into Pacific Northwest wrestling. Tommy Rich's comeback. Jerry Lawler beats Terry Funk in Memphis. Ted DiBiase gets a feature interview back when he was just a talented young stud, long before he started stuffing $100 bills down jobbers' throats. And a special feature on women's wrestling, where they actually try to treat it as a serious sport. Shocking for the time. This issue is packed with some great content, so let's dive into some of the biggest stories. Verne Gagne vs. Giant Baba, the Legends clash in Japan. Now this is a dream match. Verne Gagne, AWA champion, versus Giant Baba, the Japanese legend, in a rare one-on-one encounter. This was a huge deal because Baba had already been an NWA world champion, and he was trying to become the second man in history to hold both the AWA and NWA world titles. The match itself, a technical battle of two legends. Verne comes out strong using his signature drop kicks and the sleeper hold to take the first fall. But Baba, using his insane reach and those stiff Japanese-style strikes, takes the second fall with a big boot to the jaw. The final fall? A double countout after both men tumbled to the floor and brawled outside the ring. The takeaway here? This was a big-time clash of styles. American technical wrestling versus Japanese strong style. And a rare moment where the territories truly felt connected. If you were watching Southern Wrestling in 1981, you knew Tommy Wildfire Rich was the guy. This article paints Rich as the ultimate blue-collar underdog, a guy who fans love because he bled buckets and never quit. And at this time, he was fresh off his one-week reign as NWA World Champion. Yes, for those who don't know, Tommy Rich was NWA champion for 4 days. Was it political? Was it a thank you reign? Was it just a way for the NWA to move the belt back to Harley Race? Yes to all of the above, but the magazine doesn't dwell on that, instead presenting Rich as a man on the comeback trail, ready to take on guys like Buzz Sawyer, Ole Anderson, and even Harley Race again. The reality? Rich would never reach the main event heights again, but in 1981 he was still that fiery young babyface that every fan in Georgia believed in. Jerry Lawler defeats Terry Funk in Memphis. Oh man, Memphis wrestling in the early 80s was wild, and this match is proof. The article talks about Lawler finally beating Terry Funk in a brutal, bloody brawl in Memphis. And if you've ever seen a Lawler-Funk match, you know what that means. Weapons everywhere. Wild punches thrown like bar fights. At least one guy getting hit with a chair. This was part of one of the most underrated feuds of all time. Funk had been tormenting Lawler for years, and the magazine frames this as Lawler's triumphant moment. Reality check. Lawler and Funk would keep fighting each other for decades. But in August 1981, Lawler was on top, and Memphis wrestling was still the hottest ticket in town. The fabulous Moolah and women's wrestling feature. So here's something unexpected. This issue actually devotes a serious amount of space to women's wrestling. Moolah gets a long-form feature talking about how she's dominated the sport, training the next generation, and definitely didn't have complete control over the entire women's wrestling industry. Spoiler, she totally did. We also get spotlights on rising female stars like Joyce Grable, Winona Littleheart, and Leilani Kai, plus a whole photo gallery of women wrestlers, which is surprisingly respectful and not just an excuse for pinups. For 1981, this was progressive as hell. This was a killer issue. Verne Gagne versus Baba in a legit international dream match. Tommy Rich on the comeback trail. Jerry Lawler proving why he's the king of Memphis, and a deep dive into women's wrestling that wasn't just eye candy. If you had fun taking this time-traveling trip into old-school wrestling, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want early access to From the Pages, you'll hit that join button, become a member, and get content before anyone else. Until next time, keep your wrestling magazines in mint condition, and remember, the best feuds never really end.